Hello, dear fellows. Welcome to the another lecture about the research course we have started regarding the research for healthcare professional. And today uh, we will discuss about the mastering of article writing and thesis writing. Basically, this is another lecture in this series where last time we studied about the experimental design, that how we will design the experiments, how, why, and on what basis we will choose different experiments. And in this lecture, in today's lecture, we will discuss about the uh, art of article write-up or thesis write-up. This presentation will cover the essential steps, the techniques, and examples which will help you to write an article from scratch and from basics. So the first thing about article write-up is deciding a topic, and we have discussed these things in detail. You have to brainstorm the area of interest and then conduct the preliminary research to identify the research gaps. And after identifying the research gaps, you have to consult with the advisor and mentors of the field. And after consulting the advisor or mentors, then you focus on feasibility, resources, and scope of the work, and narrow down your topic and decide that whether it is advisable or it is a good topic to be published. And then the tips for this can be that choose a topic that excites you, ensure the topic is relevant to your field, and after that, how will you choose a strong topic and on what basis you will choose a strong topic? Basically, you have to brainstorm the idea about deciding your topic. First, you have to reflect on the coursework, internships, or personal passions, and then, for example, if we study that a biology student passionate about conservation might explore impact of urbanization on local bird species. So you have to conduct a preliminary research by using Google Scholar or PubMed or another type of different research sites to conduct proper work on the title and easily identify your research title. And then, for example, you can search in Google Scholar that climate change plus biodiversity loss plus research gap. So you can do this type of things. And then you have to consult the advisor after deciding on a topic and the research gap. You have to do consult your advisor about the feasibility, that is it possible to conduct this research, and also discuss the scope of the study, that is it a good topic or title, is it a good title to be worked on, is it a good scope of study, and then the resources which will be required during this all work. So are all the resources available? There are red flags like avoid overly broad topics like global warming, which is too vague, and narrow the focus. Too broad will be cancer treatment, and if you looked into focus title, the focus title will be effect of curcumin on breast cancer cell apoptosis in vitro models. So you have to do narrow the focus. And uh, while starting the writing process, first of all, you have to draft an outline, then main headings, literature, introduction. In main headings, there will be introduction, literature, methodology, result, discussion, conclusion, and then research question, establishing objectives. And if you look at the thesis or article structure, we will discuss all these things in detail right now. So first of all is introduction, then literature review, then you have to work on methodology, then you write your results and discuss the results, and then provide conclusion. And and then you have to add the references we have used in this research, and write all the references in the format required by the journals. And for this purpose, you can look into the other guidelines of the journal. Now, what we will study, or what are the things we have to focus on while writing introduction? We have to provide a clear and engaging overview of your topic, and provide all details about the scope of the study, and about the current research done in this area, and define the research problem, and also explain its significance, that why you want to study that research problem. And then outline the objectives and research question. In your introduction, you have to do mention your objectives and research question, and then include a summary of expected contribution of methodology. And then in literature review, first of all, you will summarize the key studies and their findings, and then highlight gaps in existing research and discuss theoretical framework relevant to your study, and then provide a logical flow of ideas which will lead to your research. Yeah, so you have to do the literature review and provide the literature which is relevant to your gaps or research. And then in methodology section, you have to detail your research, discuss in detail your research design, that either you want to conduct a qualitative or quantitative or mixed methods. And then explain the sampling strategy, that what sampling strategy will you utilize, and what type of participant will be selected for this study. Then in the methodology section, you have to describe the data collection tools, like you will conduct it to collect data through surveys, interviews, or experiments, and then justify your choice of methods and discuss the ethical consideration, provide the details about the ethical consideration you have obtained from your institute. And then while writing your results section, there are certain things on which you should focus. The first thing is to present data using tables, graphs, and charts. You have to provide all the details about results, and for better representation or visualization, you can use tables, graphs, and charts, and provide a clear and narrative explanation of the result. Apart from making tables, graphs, and charts, you have to do narrate the results, that how you got these results, what were the results of different variables or different categories, and then highlight the significant pattern and trends. And in the discussion portion, you have to interpret results in context of your research question, and compare findings with the existing literature. You have to do provide details and cite the existing literature relevant to your study, and then discuss the implication, limitation, and potential biases of the research and future direction of the research. In conclusion, you have to summarize the main findings and their significance, then propose recommendation for practice and future research, and reflect on overall contribution of your study. So this is the basic criteria in which you can easily work. For example, we discuss some theses and article structure. Let's suppose hook start with startling fact. For example, 30% of coral reef have died in last decade. So the research problem is clearly state the issue. For example, how do microplastic affect marine biodiversity? This is a research question. And for the objectives, you have to list 3 to 4 objectives. For example, you add an objective that analyze microplastic concentration in gills, and then you have to conduct the literature review, synthesize prior study. For example, Smith 2020 found microplastic in 80% of sampled fish, but mechanism remain unclear. And then in methodology, you have to discuss the whole methodology. For example, sampled 100 fish from the Gulf of Mexico using trawling nets, and then include tools, for example, GCMS for microplastic analysis. And then in results, you have to use different variables like table and graph. And for example, microplastic level increased by 40% in urban coastal region. And you have to mention the add different figures and charts in this section. And in the discussion section, you will interpret results. For example, higher pollution correlates with industrial runoff, and address the limitation that sample size limited to one season. And in conclusion, you have to discuss and summarize the key findings, and mention the recommended actions like strict regulation on plastic waste disposal. So this was all about writing a literature research article or thesis article. So what is the methodology, and what type of methodology can we use in research? So quantitative methods, just like surveys, for example, you design with Likert scale, rate pen from a 1 to 10 scale. You can use Google's form, Survey Monkey for this example. For example, if we study tested drug efficacy using a double blind RCTV 200 patient, and then you have to do quantitative work and collect data and all these things for quantitative work. And qualitative work is usually interviews. You use open-end questions. For example, describe your experience with telehealth, and tools, Otari.ai for transcription. You can use the Otter.ai. You can use that tool for transcription. And content analysis, you code theme, for example, identify trust keywords in patient feedback, and then analyze these things. So what should you include and what should you avoid if you discuss these things? You have to include clear objective and hypothesis, detailed methodology, relevant citation, and visual aids for clarity, and avoid ambiguity and excessive jargons, irrelevant data, and plagiarism. So, detailed sample, if you look at the another example, for example, in introduction, this study investigates the impact of urbanization on biodiversity of freshwater ecosystem in Pakistan, and the research aims to assess changes in species diversity and water quality metrics over the past decade. So this study is about the urbanization, impact of urbanization on the biodiversity of freshwater ecosystem. And for example, in literature review, we have to Aside the previous related study, for example, previous studies such as Ahmad et al. 2020 highlight significant biodiversity loss in urban areas. However, limited research has focused on freshwater ecosystem in developing countries. Then in methodology section, a mixed method approach, you have to mention the methodology section that what methods were employed. For example, a mixed method approach was employed combining water quality testing and species diversity surveys across 3 urban and 3 rural sites, and sampling was conducted monthly over a 6 month period. So you have to explain in detail that what type of methodologies were used in your research, and what type of methods you use, what were the details, and provide all the details of that related method. We have just written short sentences just to make sure that you people do understand this, that how to conduct these things. And for in results, you can add different figures, tables, and charts according to your data. And for example, figure 1 illustrates a 30% decline in species richness in urban sites compared to rural sites. And water quality analysis showed elevated levels of nitrates and phosphate in urban areas. So you have to mention that things, and mention your results, and also add different pictures and all these things. And in discussion, you have to link your results with the previous studies, like the findings suggest that urbanization is significantly impacting freshwater biodiversity, and urban sites exhibit higher pollution level correlating with reduced diversity of fish species. And the conclusion will be that this study emphasize the need for sustainable urban planning to mitigate environmental impacts. Future research should explore long-term trends and intervention strategies. So, in conclusion, you have to do mention the environmental impacts and all the things which we have studied in this research, and the conclusion which you have withdrawn from that research. You have to mention that things. And what are the data gathering techniques? What type of techniques you can use? For qualitative methods, you can use interviews, conducting depth, structured or semi-structured interview to explore the participant perspective. You can also use focus group, which facilitate discussion among small groups to gather diverse viewpoints. And then also do content analyze. You can use analyze textual or visual data to identify themes and patterns. And then for quantitative data methods, you can use surveys, like using questionnaires with closed or open-ended question to collect standardized data. You can use experiments and design control studies to test hypotheses, and do observation to record behaviors, interaction in natural or experimental setting. Example of tools are online survey platforms like Google Forms or SurveyMonkey, and data recording software for observational studies can be used. Now, if you look at the statistical tests application, that what type of common tests are used, and for why you use some sort of test. So the first of all is t-test. T-test is used to compare mean between two groups. For example, if you want to study about the biodiversity level of urban and rural areas, you can use the t-test to compare the means of two groups. And then ANOVA can be used to analyze difference among multiple groups, for example, species diversity across different habitat, and the regression analysis is used to explore relationship between variables, for example, pollution level and species richness. And chi-square test is used to assess the association between categorical variable, for example, habitat and species presence. And the applications of these tests are t-test is used to whether determine whether urbanization significantly affect biodiversity. And for from ANOVA, you can examine variation in water quality metric across study sites, if you look at the previous example you have studied. And for regression, you can predict biodiversity loss based on population level. And from chi-square test, if certain species are more likely to be found in specific habitat, you can find out that. So statistical test application is visualization is another application of statistical. So when you analyze data, and then you can generate bar charts for group comparison. You can use scatter chart for regression analysis, and you can use heat maps for categorical data representation. So statistical test application is common test or t-test, which is used for comparing two groups, for example, placebo versus drug group. And then ANOVA is used to compare three or more groups, for example, low, medium, high pesticide exposure. And chi-square test is used to find out the relationship between categorical variable A, for example, gender and vaccine hesitancy. And softwares for beginners, Python, Pandas, SciPy for advanced user, SPSS is for beginners. You can use SPSS, for example. There is a hypothesis that organic farming increase crop yield, so independent tests can be used to conclude that organic, and to differentiate between organic and conventional farms. And let's say our result became we have got results of Organic farm yielded 15% more net PLUs was less than 0.05. So this is a significantly statistically significant. And visualization for best practices, you can use bar charts to compare categories, for example, pollutant level across cities, and line graphs to show trends over time, for example, rising global temperature, and heat maps to highlight patterns, example, disease outbreaks by different regions. And the tools, you can use Excel for basic graphs, and Tableau and Matplotlib for advanced visuals. You can also use different softwares, Jamovi, SPSS, and Origin, MATLAB, and other softwares for this type of purpose. And for example, figure 3 correlation between air quality index and respiratory readings R is 0.75. So you can represent your statistical analysis through different figures, different graphs and charts, and things like that. So what are the tips for cracking thesis or article write-up? So first of all is the time management. First of all, you have to create a timeline with a deadline that I have to complete my first draft by, let's say, June 30th June. So you have to work on that. You have to set a small targets that first I have to write introduction, then methodology, then read literature review, and all these things. So you and then seek feedback. The most important thing is to seek feedback to discuss your articles or your thesis with your mentor, and share draft with peers and advisors. They will help you, and then and revise thoroughly, proofread for clarity, grammar and format, stay organized, and use reference management tools like EndNote or Zotero, which how you can use EndNote or Zotero will provide a detailed lecture on this. And you have to accept the positive criticism and analyze the data. So let's see. There is a practical hand-on practical example that investigating the impact of pesticide on honeybee colony health. So first of all, if you want to draft an outline, so the introduction, in the introduction, you will mention first of all the background that colony collapse pesticide in honeybees and its threats to ecosystem. You have to mention that thing and then mention the problem statement. How do neonicotinoid pesticide contribute to CCD? And then significance that honeybees pollinate 70% of global crops, their decline impact food security. And in literature review, you have to explain or mention the existing study on pesticide toxicity in bees, for example, impaired navigation, reduced lifespan, and the gaps, find out the gaps in the research, that long-term field studies on colony level effect are required, and also address the conflicting findings. Some studies show sublethal effect, other claim minimal effect. And then in methodology section, you have to explain the experimental design. For example, if we look at short experimental design that expose bees colonies to varying new nicotinide concentration in controlled field setting, and variable which have to be measured is mortality rate, foraging behavior, brood health, and the tools HPLC for pesticide residue analysis, B tag to RFID tags, and results. You have to mention your data, that, for example, 30% higher mortality in pesticide exposed colonies versus control, and reduced foraging efficiency, 50% pollen parent return, and you use visuals in this section, result section, to visualize your results with graphs comparing colony growth over 12 weeks. So you can use all these things, and you have to first make the outlines that I have to do all these things, I have to discuss all these things, and then you have to start work on this thing. Drafting an outline about discussion. First of all, in discussion, you have to link your result to your to CCD. For example, pesticide weakened colonies, making the susceptible to them susceptible to pathogens, and contrast with literature that aligns with lab studies but highlights field scale severity and limitation. That start you have to explain and to mention the limitation, that what were the limitation of this study. For example, short-term study, environmental variables, weather, and accounted for. And in conclusion, you have to conclude about the the drugs used, and the results you have got. For example, neonicotinoid significantly harm honeybee colonies, and discuss the policy implication. Educate for restricted pesticides in flowering season. You can use the policy, discuss the policy implications, so that any government who or any official person who study your article can get idea from that thing, that how we can control this disease. And then you also discuss the potential way for the future research, that synergity effect with climate changes can be potential breakthrough in this. And how you will conduct or how you will create your research question. For if you study example of research questions should be specific. For example, how does exposure to new nicotinamide pesticide affect honeybee mortality rate? So this is very specific and it should be measurable. The measurable that the pesticide exposure reduce foraging efficiency, pollen collecting per bee, and it must be relevant that, for example, are sublethal pesticide dose is linked to colony collapse in natural environment and why this works. When you focus on a single variable pesticide and measurable outcome mortality and foraging, and it directly ties to ecological and agricultural relevance. So you have to be specific, measurable, and relevant while farming your research question. And then while establishing your research objectives, you have to define the different details, like if you want to conduct make objectives for this study. For example, you can the first objective may be that define exposure level, that test 0 ppb control and 10 pp and 50 pp in new nicotinamide concentration, and then assess the health, colony health, that track brood development, queen viability, and worker lifespan. You have to evaluate the immune response. For example, measure the expression of detoxification gene CYP Q9 Q3, and these all things are when you will do these things and write down your proper objectives. This will be clear and actionable goals aligned with the research question, and it will be quantifiable metrics. For example, multi-literary gene expressions, and you can easily work on that things later on during your work. So the student activity is to draft a thesis article outline for a study on effect of smoking on mental health. Use the same headings, introduction, literature review, etc., and create two research questions, three objectives, and this activity will help you to be able to write. Or to make outlines for your own article or your own study, and in references section include all the references for citations for all the reference material. For example, you can use APA style or other different style which is used in your institute. So this was all about writing an research article or thesis article, or so I hope you might have learned a lot of things from this. And if you have any type of any sort of question, you can ask, and you can send us your queries. We will respond to your queries. Thank you so much for your concentration and time.